And the interesting thing is that the politicians have all bought into the headline of the logic, but are increasingly unnerved by the implications of the rest of the logic. As if you can take little bites out of good science, take the bits that are convenient, and then comfortably ignore the bits that are less convenient. So by all accounts, the 2-degree threshold constitutes good science. It must, because they all signed up to it, again in Cancun, as they did in Copenhagen a year ago. But being precise about the 450 parts per million, let alone about the percentage of cuts required, is a different story. Here in the UK, because the UK is nothing if not utterly brilliant at setting long-term targets. We absolutely love doing that. Most of our politicians know they'll be dead by 2050, so they're not really worried. Here in the UK, we've gone for an 80% target. And actually, I will come back to the degree to which the UK has got some serious international credibility in this. So how do we think we're going to deal with this challenge, okay? So if you look around and you listen to what the parties say at the moment, there are basically 3 things which we're trying to get to grips with to manage this reduction in greenhouse gases. I'm not going to run you through all the targets and the budgets and all that stuff because it's really just too much to do in one evening. We have 3 sort of things we're particularly keen on. The first is called decoupling. It sounds almost as grim as it is. And what it means is separating out the benefits of economic growth from the disbenefits. So we all love economic growth still, well, most people, apart from trusty members of the Green Party, who remain deeply sceptical about economic growth. But most people love economic growth. But what we don't love are the consequences of that economic growth. In this instance, the externalities caused by the burning of fossil fuels, these greenhouse gases that we put into the atmosphere. So every political party today is 100% signed up to the concept of decoupling. Keep the growth, but get rid of the externalities. And we have various ways of doing this. Cost internalization, this was Nick Stern's main suggestion in the Stern report on the economics of climate change, is that we have to bring the cost of carbon into our economies. That's the only way to make markets work effectively, to start paying a real price for every ton of carbon we emit. And we're beginning to sort of see little signs of that. The EU's emissions trading scheme, very ineffective way of internalizing the cost of carbon, but at least it's there. And here in the UK, we have something called the Carbon Reduction Commitment, this government's first stealth tax, which is now a tax levied at £12 a tonne on emissions of CO2 from big energy-using organisations. So we're quite keen on this, and politicians get very excited about the idea of decoupling, because it allows them, on the one hand, to hold on to the concept of economic growth whilst doing their obligations on climate change. Can we really do that? That's another matter. That's for an economics talk, but I'm not going to talk about that this evening. Secondly, we love the upbeat stuff about clean tech, renewable energy, smart materials, all sorts of wondrous ideas to bring innovation into the frame to do this decoupling, essentially to generate the wealth we need without relying on the things that cause such damage. And thirdly, and I won't talk about this, marketization. You may have heard that in Cancun, world leaders or governments have now agreed a little bit more about this process of putting a money value, a marketizable value, on the world's remaining forests. Somewhere between 16 and 18% of total emissions comes from deforestation. So the smart money now is on how do we put a money value on those forests to keep them in the ground and persuade countries not to cut them down. And we're beginning to see that. Norway, for instance, has got a discussion going with Indonesia to provide $1 billion to help Indonesia protect a huge area of its forests from development for palm oil to keep those forests intact. And the $1 billion essentially is a payment for the carbon that will be kept in that forest rather than emitted if they move towards palm oil plantations. So it's beginning to happen. Okay. And then we have other little policy instruments, but governments aren't really terribly serious about this. Regulation is definitely out of favour at the moment. It would be quite easy to regulate for a lot of these things without relying on cack-handed market instruments, but that won't work. Everybody today, as you know, is dead keen on nudging. I hope you're all into all the terminology now about nudging, because if you're not keeping up with trendy politics today. Nudging is the name of the game. Everybody's into nudging, especially David Cameron, Oliver Letwin and the like. I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm not quite sure how long it'll take to nudge humankind into the apocalypse, but nonetheless, that's the direction we're heading for. And of course, we have a little bit of a subtext now creeping in about shouldn't we do rather less on economic growth and have a bit more focus on well-being and happiness, which is nice. So, let me come back to the innovation bit, because this is where the science turns into commercial reality and does the trick of generating economic value for people around the world. Wonderful quote here from the Harvard Business Review. Our research shows that sustainability is a motherlode of organizational and technological innovation that yields both bottom line and top line returns. And the truth is, the last 10 years has seen a massive surge in organizations and investors and entrepreneurs bringing forward new ideas to help crack this issue about accelerating climate change. And for a moment, I'm going to stop being cynical about this, because this is really important. The innovation pipeline around the clean tech agenda is as exciting and dynamic and substantive as it has ever been. And it continues to get more so every year. I'm not going to whirl you through all the technologies, but this happens to be my favorite at the moment. I'm pretty keen on PV, but I'm actually really, really keen on this technology, which is called concentrating solar power. And what you can see here is a huge array of heliostats, parabolic reflectors, that essentially concentrate the incoming radiation onto these towers, which are full of water, which generate steam, which turn turbines, which produce electrons. It's actually, in some respects, not particularly sophisticated technology. But getting these heliostats to maximize the full radiative value of the sun, moving just tiny little bits to do that job, is pretty impressive. This is a 22 megawatt plant outside Seville. Spain is currently investing in about 50 of these CSP plants. North Africa is beginning to start investments in plants. America announced recently that it's going to build a vast array of solar farms in the Mojave Desert, 8 square kilometers of the Mojave Desert to be covered completely in concentrating solar power plants. North of South Africa now has just decided it's going to do a 15 square kilometer solar farm. Just think about 15 square kilometers. This is a lot of serious solar power coming into these systems. Deliverable now. Available now. Anybody with enough sunshine can do this anywhere in the world. Not complicated. We haven't got enough of the stuff. Although we do want to have little baby ones of these in Cornwall, if the government will allow it. We're also beginning to see something quite interesting going on, which I capture here in this image of the Tesla motor car. Now, I only mention the Tesla because the one moment where Jeremy Clarkson has been known to get enthusiastic about the low-carbon future was the moment that he got behind the wheel of this car. And he came away saying, my God, if that's the future, I think I probably quite like it. Not a bad quote from Jeremy Clarkson. Why? Well, you know why. Because it goes from 0 to, I don't know, 190 miles an hour in 2 seconds, or whatever other stupid statistic it is that gets Jeremy Clarkson's rocks off. But that's the sort of thing that makes Mr. Clarkson really excited. It's also the kind of thing that makes a large number of people think, oh, sustainability. Maybe it's not such a downbeat, miserable, sacrificial, tree-hugging little niche of weirdos. Maybe it is a serious way of bringing forward new technologies to meet the needs of people and their aspirations.